The courthouse steps felt cold beneath my feet, but I wasn't shaking from the November chill. 32 years, gone with a judge's signature. My husband stood 10 feet away, looking like a stranger, because he was. He had always been. I had begged this man to love me, cried myself to sleep asking what was wrong with me, why I wasn't enough. Then I found the hidden phone. The women, the stolen money, the decades of lies. Something died in me that day, but it wasn't my heart. It was the woman who believed love meant making yourself smaller. Today, I walked away from those courthouse steps as someone new, someone who would never beg again. The humidity clung to Eleanor's skin like a second layer as she stood on the wraparound porch of their antebellum home on Trad Street. At 63, she had spent more than half her life in Charleston, South Carolina, watching the palmetto trees sway in the coastal breeze and listening to the distant bells of St. Michael's Episcopal Church marked the hours. The house, with its Charleston green shutters and meticulously maintained garden, had been her pride for 3 decades. Now, it felt like a monument to a lie. It was August 2019, and the heat was oppressive even at 7 in the morning. Eleanor had always loved Charleston summers despite their brutality, the way the air smelled of Confederate jasmine and salt marsh, the way the light turned golden over the harbor at sunset. But today, the heat felt suffocating, pressing down on her chest like a physical weight. Inside, Richard was still asleep. Her husband of 32 years. The man she had met in 1987 at a charity gala at the Gibbes Museum of Art, when she was a 29-year-old administrative assistant at the Medical University of South Carolina, and he was a 34-year-old commercial real estate developer with a confident smile and southern charm that made her knees weak. He had swept her off her feet with weekend trips to Kiowa Island, dinners at Husk and Peninsula Grill, promises of a life built on partnership and devotion. They married in May 1987 at the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, with 200 guests and a reception at the Charleston Place Hotel. Eleanor wore her mother's pearls and carried gardenias, Richard's favorite. She remembered feeling like the luckiest woman alive. The coffee in her hand had gone cold. She hadn't slept. How could she, after what she had discovered yesterday afternoon? Eleanor had been looking for their tax returns in Richard's home office, a room she rarely entered, respecting his privacy and his need for a workspace sanctuary, as he called it. She needed the 2018 return for their accountant, something routine. But when she opened the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk, she found a phone. Not his iPhone, which he carried everywhere. This was an older Android device, hidden beneath folders. Her hands had trembled as she powered it on. No password. And there, in brutal detail, was evidence of a life she hadn't known existed. Text messages spanning years, photos, hotel reservations, Venmo transactions. Not one affair. Multiple. Women with names she didn't recognize. Ashley, 29, from his real estate firm. Jennifer, 34, a yoga instructor he met at the gym. Tanya, 41, a divorced mother of 2 he apparently helped financially for the past 3 years. The messages were explicit, romantic, full of promises he had never made to Eleanor in decades. "You're the only one who understands me. I can't wait to leave all the bullshit behind and just be with you. She doesn't suspect anything. She's too busy with her book club and garden club nonsense." Eleanor had vomited in the guest bathroom. Then she had gone through every file, every message, every photo. The timeline stretched back to at least 2005. 14 years of systematic deception. Maybe longer. How far back did it really go? Had there ever been a time when he was faithful? But it wasn't just the infidelity that shattered her. It was the money. Richard had always controlled their finances. He was the breadwinner, the successful developer. Eleanor had stopped working in 1995 when her mother got sick, and she never went back. Richard assured her they didn't need her income. He handled investments, retirement accounts, property holdings. She trusted him completely. The bank statements and investment documents she found told a different story. Their joint savings account, which she believed held over $400,000 for retirement, actually contained $82,000. Richard had drained it systematically over the years. Cash withdrawals, transfers to accounts she didn't know existed, payments to credit cards in his name only. He had taken out a second mortgage on their home without telling her. They owed $315,000 on a house that should have been paid off 5 years ago. He had cashed out his life insurance policy, the one that was supposed to protect her if something happened to him. He had emptied her inheritance. When Eleanor's father died in 2012, he left her $150,000. Richard convinced her to let him invest it properly. That money was gone. Spent on hotel rooms, gifts for other women, a boat he kept at a marina in Mount Pleasant that she had never seen. 32 years. She had given him everything: her youth, her career, her trust, her body, her devotion. She had ironed his shirts every Sunday evening. She had hosted dinner parties for his business partners, playing the perfect Southern hostess. She had sat alone at home while he worked late countless nights, never questioning, always believing. And when he came home smelling of perfume, she had believed his excuses about hugging clients at closing celebrations. When he became distant in bed, she blamed herself for aging, for not being attractive enough. When he snapped at her for small things, she tried harder to be the wife he needed. She had begged for his attention, begged for affection. "Please, Richard, talk to me. What's wrong? What can I do differently?" She had gone to marriage counseling alone when he refused to attend. She had read books about keeping marriage alive. She had lost 20 pounds at 58 because he made a comment about her letting herself go. She had implored, pleaded, negotiated with herself about what she could tolerate, what she could forgive if only he would love her again the way he used to, or the way she thought he used to. The woman who did those things felt like a stranger now. Eleanor set her coffee cup on the porch railing and watched a jogger pass on the sidewalk below. A young woman, maybe 30, with a long ponytail and expensive running shoes. She wondered if Richard had affairs with women like that. Younger, firmer, uncomplicated. The front door opened behind her. Richard stepped out, already dressed for work in gray slacks and a pressed white shirt, still buttoning his cuffs. At 68, he was still handsome. Silver hair, strong jawline, the kind of aging that people called distinguished. Eleanor had once loved watching him get ready in the morning. The ritual of it, the intimacy. "You're up early," he said, not really looking at her. He never really looked at her anymore. "Couldn't sleep," Eleanor replied. Her voice sounded calm, detached. She was surprised by that. "Well, I've got a 7:30 breakfast meeting at Fleet Landing, so I need to head out." He checked his watch, a Rolex she had given him for their 25th anniversary. $7,000 she had saved secretly from her small monthly allowance he gave her from their account that he had been draining for years. "Richard," she said quietly. He paused, one hand on the porch column. "What? Do you love me?" The question hung in the humid morning air. Richard's face registered irritation, then forced patience. "Eleanor, I don't have time for this right now. I'm running late." "Do you love me?" she repeated. He sighed heavily, the way someone sighs at an unreasonable child. "Of course I do. What kind of question is that?" "Jesus, Eleanor, I really need to go." She nodded slowly. "Okay." He left without kissing her goodbye. He hadn't kissed her goodbye in years, actually. When had that stopped? She couldn't remember. Eleanor stood on the porch for another 20 minutes, watching Charleston wake up around her. Tourists were already wandering down Trad Street, taking photos of the historic homes. A horse-drawn carriage clip-clopped past. Someone was playing jazz on a radio somewhere nearby. Everything looked the same, but something inside her had fundamentally changed. She wasn't going to beg anymore. She wasn't going to cry and ask what she had done wrong. She wasn't going to negotiate or compromise or try to be smaller, quieter, more acceptable. The woman who had done those things for 32 years had died yesterday afternoon in Richard's office, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal. Eleanor didn't know yet who she would become, but she knew with absolute certainty that she would never be that woman again. Eleanor spent the next 3 days moving through her life like a ghost. She went to her weekly garden club meeting at the Magnolia Plantation, smiled at the appropriate times, discussed azalea care and soil acidity with women she had known for 20 years. She attended Sunday service at St. Philip's Church, where she and Richard had a family pew 5 rows from the front. She sang hymns. She shook hands during the passing of the peace. No one noticed anything was wrong. Or if they did, Southern manners prevented them from asking directly. But inside, Eleanor was conducting an investigation. Every moment Richard was out of the house, she was in his office, photographing documents with her phone, creating a timeline, building a case she didn't yet know what to do with. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking in its completeness. Ashley Thornton, 29, had worked at Richard's firm, Low Country Commercial Development, for 4 years. The affair started within months of her hiring. Richard had taken her to Miami, New York, Atlanta on supposed business trips. The company credit card paid for everything. Eleanor found receipts for couples massages, champagne, lingerie from Bloomingdale's. Jennifer Watts, the yoga instructor, had been seeing Richard for 7 years. He paid for her apartment in West Ashley. $900 a month, every month since 2012, labeled in his personal accounts as property maintenance. Tanya Cordell was perhaps the most painful. Richard had met her at a real estate conference in 2016. She was going through a divorce, struggling financially with 2 kids in elementary school. Richard had positioned himself as a mentor, a helper. But the help came with conditions. The text messages made that clear. "I'm always here for you, baby. You know that. Just need you to be patient with my situation. Eleanor is fragile. The timing has to be right." He had promised multiple women he would leave Eleanor. He had no intention of doing so. Eleanor also discovered that Richard had been stealing from his own company. Small amounts at first, then larger. He had a gambling problem she had never suspected. Online poker, sports betting. He owed money to people with names like Tony and Big Mike. The texts about these debts were vague but menacing. Their financial situation was worse than she had initially thought. Much worse. They were, in practical terms, bankrupt. The house had equity, but it was heavily mortgaged. Richard's retirement account, which should have been robust after 4 decades in real estate, held only $97,000. They had credit card debt approaching $80,000. Eleanor's name was on everything. The mortgage. The credit cards. If Richard's financial house of cards collapsed, she would be buried in the rubble. On Tuesday evening, Richard came home at 9:30, claiming he had been at a city planning commission meeting. Eleanor was in the sunroom, pretending to read a novel. The hidden phone she had found showed he had actually been at the Vendu Inn with Ashley, room 304, from 6:15 to 9 o'clock. "How was your meeting?" Eleanor asked without looking up from her book. "Long, tedious, the usual bureaucratic nonsense." Richard poured himself a bourbon from the bar cart. "I'm exhausted. Think I'll head up to bed?" Eleanor nodded. "Okay, good night." He paused in the doorway. "You feeling all right? You've been quiet lately." She finally looked at him. Really looked. His face showed mild concern, but his eyes were already distracted, probably thinking about Ashley or checking his phone for messages. This man was a stranger. Had he always been a stranger? "I'm fine," Eleanor said. "Just tired." "Well, get some rest. You're not getting any younger." He said it casually, almost absently, but the words landed like a slap. After he went upstairs, Eleanor sat in the darkness of the sunroom, listening to the cicadas and tree frogs outside. Charleston nights in August were alive with sound. Insects, distant traffic from Meeting Street, the occasional boat horn from the harbor. She thought about her mother, who had died in 1998 from ovarian cancer. Margaret Ann Whitfield had been a force, a woman who raised 3 children largely alone, while her husband worked offshore on oil rigs for weeks at a time. She had taught Eleanor to be independent, strong, practical. But she had also taught Eleanor that a good wife made things work, that marriage required sacrifice, that you didn't give up when things got hard. "Men aren't perfect, sweetheart," her mother had said during a rare moment of candor when Eleanor was in college. "You love them anyway. You make a life." Eleanor wondered what her mother would say about this situation. Would she still counsel endurance? Or would she recognize that there was a difference between imperfection and systematic cruelty? On Wednesday afternoon, Eleanor had lunch with her sister Patricia at 82 Queen, a restaurant they had been going to together for years. Patricia was 65, divorced, a retired school principal who lived in a condo on Daniel Island. She had left her husband in 2003 after 23 years of marriage when she discovered he had a second family in Colombia. They ordered she-crab soup and shrimp and grits. Patricia talked about her grandchildren, her book club, her plans to visit her son in Denver. Eleanor listened, contributed appropriately, maintained her mask. But Patricia wasn't fooled. Halfway through lunch, she set down her spoon and looked directly at Eleanor. "Okay, what's going on?" "What do you mean?" "Ellie, I've known you for 63 years. You're not here. Where are you?" Eleanor felt something crack in her chest. The urge to tell someone, to share the weight, was overwhelming. But if she said it out loud, it would be real. Irreversible. I found something, she whispered. Patricia waited. Richard he's been having affairs, multiple affairs, for years, maybe decades, and he's stolen all our money. We have nothing, Pat. Nothing. And Eleanor's voice broke. I've been begging him to love me while he's been destroying everything. Patricia's face went white, then red with fury. That son of a bitch. I don't know what to do. You leave. Today. Right now. You pack a bag and you leave. I can't. Yes, you can. Where would I go? I have no money of my own. No job. I haven't worked in 24 years. I'm 63 years old, Pat. Who's going to hire me? What am I supposed to do? The questions tumbled out, each one a brick in the wall of her paralysis. This was the calculation Richard had relied on. He had systematically made her dependent, isolated, trapped, and she had let him. Patricia reached across the table and gripped Eleanor's hand. You're going to fight. You're going to get a lawyer. You're going to take him for everything he's worth, which apparently isn't much, but still. You're going to stop begging and start demanding. I'm scared. Good. Be scared. But be brave too. Because that man has been counting on you being too scared to do anything. Prove him wrong. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay in bed next to Richard, who snored softly, oblivious or unconcerned. The air conditioning hummed. The ceiling fan turned slowly overhead, casting shifting shadows. She thought about the girl she had been at 29, ambitious, competent, full of plans. She had wanted to go back to school, get her master's in public health. Richard had discouraged it, suggesting they start trying for children instead. They never had children. Eleanor had fertility problems, endometriosis that resulted in 2 miscarriages and years of painful, expensive treatments that ultimately failed. Richard had seemed supportive at the time, but looking back, she wondered if he had been relieved. Children would have complicated his double life. By her mid-40s, Eleanor had stopped trying. She threw herself into volunteer work, church activities, maintaining their home and social calendar. She built a life of service and support. She made Richard's life easy, comfortable, and he had repaid her with contempt. The shame of it burned. Not just his actions, but her own acceptance. Her own diminishment. The way she had made herself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the space he allowed her. The way she had excused and rationalized and blamed herself. The woman who had done those things needed to die. And in the darkness of that August night, Eleanor felt something shift inside her. Not hope exactly, but determination. A cold, clear resolve. She would not beg for scraps of affection anymore. She would not negotiate for basic respect. She would not accept lies dressed up as love. Whatever came next, whoever she became, it would be on her terms. The woman who had spent 32 years serving Richard Caldwell was dead, and Eleanor was ready to bury her. Eleanor hired Catherine Brennan on a Thursday morning. Brennan Family Law had an office on Broad Street, in a renovated historic building across from the courthouse. Catherine Brennan was 56, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for being ruthless in divorce proceedings. Mrs. Caldwell, Catherine said after Eleanor had finished explaining the situation, spreading the printed photos and bank statements across the polished conference table. I'm going to be direct with you. Your husband has committed financial abuse, marital fraud, and possibly criminal fraud depending on how he's been moving money around. The good news is, South Carolina is an equitable distribution state, which means assets get divided fairly, not necessarily equally. Given his behavior, we have an excellent case for a disproportionate award in your favor. How long will this take? Eleanor asked. Depends on whether he fights. If he's smart, he'll settle quietly to avoid public exposure. Men like your husband, successful, prominent in the community, don't like their dirty laundry aired. We can use that. And if he does fight, then we go to war. Catherine's smile was thin and sharp. Mrs. Caldwell, I've been doing this for 28 years. Your husband is not the first charming narcissist who's drained marital assets to fund affairs. He won't be the last. But here's what I need you to understand. This will get ugly. He will say terrible things about you. He will try to make you doubt yourself. He will weaponize your love against you. Can you handle that? Eleanor thought about the past 3 weeks. The nights lying awake. The days moving through fog. The death of illusions she had clung to for decades. Yes, she said. I can handle it. Good. Then let's begin. Catherine filed the divorce petition on Friday, August 23rd. Per South Carolina law, Richard had to be formally served. Catherine recommended having him served at his office to maximize embarrassment, but Eleanor declined. Whatever Richard had done, she didn't want to be cruel. The process server met him at home Saturday morning. Eleanor was at Patricia's condo when it happened. She had moved out the day before, taking only clothes and personal items. Patricia had set up the guest room for her. Richard called 47 times Saturday afternoon. Eleanor didn't answer. He left voicemails that progressed from confused to angry to pleading. Eleanor, what the hell is this? Call me back. This is insane. Over what? Some stupid argument? Call me right now. Baby, please, let's talk about this. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. The baby made her nauseous. He hadn't called her that in years. On Sunday, he showed up at Patricia's building. The doorman called up. Patricia answered. Tell him I'm not here, Eleanor said. Patricia got on the intercom. Richard, you're not welcome here. Eleanor doesn't want to see you. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police. I need to talk to my wife. Your wife is done talking to you. Go away. Eleanor listened from the living room, her hands shaking. Part of her, the old part, the trained part, wanted to go down there, to smooth things over, to make it okay. That impulse was powerful, ingrained by 3 decades of conditioning. But she stayed where she was. Let him rage at a locked door. Let him feel a fraction of the helplessness she had felt for years. Over the next 2 weeks, the full extent of Richard's life came to light. Catherine's forensic accountant traced money through multiple accounts and discovered Richard had been far more reckless than Eleanor knew. He had invested in failed ventures with his mistresses, a boutique hotel with Jennifer that went bankrupt, a photography studio with Ashley that never opened. He had gambled away nearly $60,000 online over the past 18 months. Most devastating was the testimony Catherine obtained from Richard's former business partner, Martin Grayson. Martin had left Low Country Commercial Development in 2017, under murky circumstances. Turns out Richard had pushed him out after Martin questioned accounting irregularities. Martin was willing to testify about Richard's financial misconduct, his affairs with employees, his cocaine use at company events. Cocaine. Eleanor had never seen Richard use drugs. But apparently, he had been using recreationally for years with Ashley and other 20-somethings from his office. Who was this man? Had she ever actually known him? The day Catherine showed Eleanor credit card statements revealing Richard had taken Ashley to Bermuda for a week last October, when he told Eleanor he was at a developers conference in Orlando, Eleanor went to the bathroom and screamed into a towel. Not from sadness anymore, from rage. How dare he? How dare he waste their life, their money, their years on his selfish gratification, while she sat at home defending his absences to concerned friends, making excuses for why he never wanted to travel with her, blaming herself for his disinterest. She had begged this man to love her. She had cried herself to sleep, wondering what was wrong with her, why she wasn't enough. And the whole time, he had been laughing at her gullibility with women young enough to be his daughters. The shame curdled into fury. And fury, Eleanor discovered, was clarifying. In mid-September, Richard's attorney requested a mediation meeting. Eleanor agreed, mostly because Catherine thought they could pressure him into a favorable settlement. The mediation took place at a neutral location downtown. Eleanor dressed carefully that morning. A navy sheath dress, pearls, her hair styled at her regular salon on King Street. She looked polished, confident. She wanted Richard to see that she wasn't broken. When she walked into the conference room, Richard was already there with his attorney, a slick young man named Trevor Hawthorne. Richard's eyes widened when he saw Eleanor. She looked, she realized with some satisfaction, better than she had in years. Lighter. Eleanor, Richard said, half standing. Can we talk privately? Just for a minute? No, Eleanor said calmly, taking her seat next to Catherine. Anything you have to say can be said with our attorneys present. This is ridiculous. We've been married for 32 years. You're really going to throw that away? Eleanor looked at him across the table, really looked, and felt nothing. The love was gone. The hurt was fading. What remained was cold assessment. I'm not throwing anything away, Richard. You already did that. The mediation lasted 6 hours. Richard's attorney tried to argue that Eleanor deserved only the minimum marital asset split, claiming Richard's business acumen had built their wealth. Catherine countered with evidence of financial abuse, infidelity, and material deception. The mediator, a retired family court judge, was clearly unimpressed with Richard's position. During a break, Richard cornered Eleanor in the hallway. "Why are you doing this? I made mistakes, okay? But we can work through it. We always do." "No," Eleanor said quietly. "We don't. I worked through it. I swallowed my pain and made excuses for you and begged you to see me as worthy of basic respect. But you don't respect me, Richard. You never did. And I'm done asking for something you're incapable of giving. I love you." The words sounded hollow, performative. "No, you don't. And that's okay. I don't love you anymore either. That's what you don't understand. The woman you married, the woman who would have done anything for you, she's gone. You killed her. And I'm glad she's dead because she deserved so much better than you." Richard's face contorted with rage. "You self-righteous bitch. You think you're so perfect? You were boring, Eleanor. Boring in bed, boring at parties, boring to come home to. I stayed with you out of obligation. You should be grateful for that." And there it was. The truth under all the lies. The contempt he had hidden beneath polite distance for years. Eleanor smiled. Not from happiness, but from vindication. "Thank you for that, Richard. That's the most honest you've been with me in 32 years. She walked back into the mediation room, and Catherine made it clear. They were going to trial unless Richard agreed to Eleanor's terms. 60% of all marital assets, including the house. Richard was responsible for all marital debt. Eleanor would receive temporary spousal support during the proceedings and permanent alimony afterward. Richard's attorney looked at the numbers and recommended settlement. Fighting would cost more in legal fees than Richard would save. Plus, Catherine had made clear she would introduce evidence of every affair, every financial irregularity, every lie. Richard's reputation in Charleston's tight-knit business community would be destroyed. Richard settled 3 weeks later. Eleanor got the house, which they would have to sell to pay off the debts, but she'd keep most of the equity. She got what remained of the retirement accounts. She got $4,500 a month in alimony for 7 years. It wasn't enough to make up for what she had lost, but it was enough to survive, enough to start over. By late October, the divorce was nearly final. Eleanor had moved into a small 2-bedroom townhouse in West Ashley, a far cry from the historic elegance of Trad Street, but it was hers. She bought furniture at consignment shops, hung her own curtains, learned to manage a budget. The settlement hearing was scheduled for November 4th. Just a formality at this point. The judge would approve the agreement, sign the papers, and Eleanor would be officially unmarried for the first time since she was 29 years old. She woke that morning feeling strange, not nervous, not sad, free. Patricia drove her to the courthouse. They parked on Broad Street, walked up the steps of the Moorish-style building she had passed hundreds of times but never entered. Inside, the hallways smelled of old wood and floor wax. People in business suits moved purposefully past them. Catherine met them outside the courtroom. "It's straightforward today. Judge Harmon will review the agreement, ask if you both understand and agree to the terms, then sign the decree. 10 minutes, tops." "Will Richard be here?" Eleanor asked. "He has to be, but you won't have to speak to him." They entered the courtroom. Richard was already seated with Trevor. He looked diminished somehow, older. His hair seemed thinner. He had lost weight, and not in a good way. His face looked drawn, almost haggard. He glanced at Eleanor as she sat down at the plaintiff's table. Their eyes met for just a moment. She saw something there she had never seen before. Shame. Real shame. Judge Harmon, a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses, entered. Everyone stood. The formalities began. Case number 2019, DR 5734, Caldwell versus Caldwell. I've reviewed the settlement agreement negotiated between the parties. Mrs. Caldwell, do you understand the terms and agree to them freely? Eleanor stood. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Caldwell? Richard stood, less steadily. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Harmon signed the papers. The marriage between Eleanor Ann Caldwell and Richard James Caldwell is hereby dissolved. The settlement agreement is incorporated into this decree. You're both free to remarry. Good luck to you both. Just like that. 32 years ended with a signature and a sentence. Eleanor expected to feel something dramatic: relief, grief, anger. Instead, she felt quiet, still. Outside the courthouse, November sun warmed the brick sidewalks. Patricia hugged her. Catherine shook her hand and reminded her about the paperwork she needed to sign to transfer vehicle titles and update insurance. As Patricia went to get the car, Eleanor stood alone on the courthouse steps, watching Charleston move around her. Tourists with cameras, lawyers in suits, a bride and groom posing for photos on the lawn across the street, apparently having just gotten married in a different courtroom. Eleanor. She turned. Richard stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain. "I'm sorry," he said. Eleanor studied him. Was he sorry, or was he sorry he got caught? Did it matter? "Okay," she said simply. "That's it? Just okay?" "What do you want me to say, Richard?" "I don't know, I never meant to hurt you." Eleanor almost laughed. "Yes, you did. Maybe not consciously, but every choice you made was about what you wanted with no regard for how it affected me. That's not accidental hurt. That's willful disregard. I did love you, at the beginning. Maybe. I don't know anymore what was real and what was performance, but it doesn't matter now." Richard looked like he wanted to say more, but Patricia pulled up in her car, honking lightly. Eleanor started to leave, then paused. "Richard, I spent 32 years thinking I wasn't enough for you. That if I was smarter, prettier, quieter, louder, something, that you'd love me the way I needed to be loved. But the truth is, you couldn't have loved any woman properly, because you're incapable of putting anyone's needs above your own. And I'm grateful to finally understand that. Because it means it was never my fault." She walked to Patricia's car without looking back. That evening, Eleanor did something she hadn't done in decades. She went out alone. Not to volunteer, not to a church function, not to garden club. She drove to Folly Beach, parked near the pier, and walked down to the sand. November on Folly Beach was quieter than summer. The tourists had mostly gone home. A few surfers in wetsuits rode small waves. A man walked his dog along the waterline. Eleanor took off her shoes and walked into the cold Atlantic water. It shocked her feet, made her gasp. But she kept walking until the water reached her knees, soaking the hem of her dress. The horizon stretched endlessly before her. Sky and water and possibility. She thought about the woman she had been, the administrative assistant with dreams of graduate school, the young bride full of hope, the middle-aged woman desperately trying to save a marriage that had never really existed. That woman was gone, drowned in the weight of Richard's betrayals, smothered under years of making herself smaller. But someone new stood here now. Someone who had survived humiliation and financial devastation and the death of every illusion she had clung to. Someone who didn't need Richard's approval to exist. Someone who could walk into cold water just because she wanted to feel something real. Eleanor spread her arms wide and let the wind whip her hair around her face. She tasted salt spray, felt the sun warm on her back. This was grief and liberation tangled together. This was an ending that was also a beginning. She stayed until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Then she walked back to shore, got in her car, and drove to her small townhouse in West Ashley. Tomorrow, she would start looking for a job. She had already registered for 2 online courses, one in medical coding, one in nonprofit management. At 63, she was starting over. It was terrifying. It was also exhilarating. 6 months later, on a warm April morning in 2020, Eleanor sat on the small patio of her townhouse, drinking coffee and listening to birds in the live oak tree overhead. The world was in the middle of a pandemic. COVID-19 had shut down most of the country, and Charleston was under lockdown. But Eleanor felt strangely more alive than she had in decades. She had gotten a job in January just before the pandemic hit. Administrative coordinator at a women's shelter and advocacy center called Palmetto Hope. The pay was modest, $42,000 a year, but it came with health insurance and a sense of purpose she hadn't realized she was missing. The shelter served women escaping domestic violence, financial abuse, trafficking. Women whose stories resonated with Eleanor's in ways that were both painful and healing. She wasn't therapist or counselor. She handled intake paperwork, insurance verification, grant reporting. But the women she interacted with saw something in her, a recognition, maybe, of shared experience. "You get it," one woman, Maria, had told her during a lunch break. Maria was 38, escaping a 15-year marriage to a man who had isolated her from family, controlled every dollar, monitored her every movement. Most people, they mean well, but they don't really understand. You do. Eleanor had told Maria her story. Not all of it, but enough. And in the telling, she found something surprising. Her pain had purpose. Her survival meant something. She could use what she had lived through to help others navigate their own escapes. The online courses had led to certifications. Eleanor was now working towards certification as a financial abuse advocate, learning the legal and practical strategies for helping survivors rebuild their economic lives. She had also started writing. Just personal essays at first, processed in a journal. But then a friend encouraged her to submit to a local women's magazine. Her essay, "The Day I Stopped Begging for Love," was published in March. The response was overwhelming. Women from all over South Carolina reached out, sharing their own stories of marriages where they had diminished themselves, begged for scraps, lost themselves completely. Eleanor realized she wasn't alone, had never been alone. There were thousands of women who had lived variations of her story, and many of them, like her, had found their way out. Patricia came over every Sunday for porch coffee, their new ritual. "You look different," Patricia said one morning. "Happy." "I am," Eleanor said, and realized it was true. Not the bubbly, naive happiness of youth, something deeper, contentment, self-possession. She had started dating, though that was on hold now because of the pandemic. A man named Thomas, 65, a retired English teacher she had met at a virtual book club. They had gone on 3 dates before quarantine hit. He was kind, thoughtful, content to move slowly. He asked questions and listened to her answers. The contrast to Richard was stark. Eleanor wasn't sure where it would go with Thomas. She wasn't in a hurry to find out. For the first time in her adult life, she was comfortable being alone, complete in herself. Richard, she heard through mutual acquaintances, was not doing well. Ashley had left him when the money ran out. Jennifer had moved to Atlanta with a new boyfriend. His business was struggling. The commercial real estate market had taken a hit even before COVID, and Richard's reputation in Charleston was damaged beyond repair. He was living in a condo in Mount Pleasant, downsized and diminished. Eleanor felt no satisfaction in his downfall. Just a kind of sad recognition that people reap what they sow. She had seen him once by accident in February. She was at the Harris Teeter on Savannah Highway when she spotted him in the produce section. He looked awful, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, buying a sad collection of frozen dinners and beer. He saw her, too. They made eye contact across the Apple display. Eleanor felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no anything. Just recognition of a person she used to know. She nodded politely and moved on with her shopping. That night, she had called Patricia. "I saw Richard today. How did you feel?" "Like I was looking at a stranger, which I guess I was. Maybe I always was." "Does it hurt?" Eleanor thought about it. "No, it doesn't hurt anymore. That's the strangest part. I thought it would always hurt, but it's just gone. He has no power over me anymore, and that's the best revenge I could have asked for. Indifference." Now, in April quarantine, Eleanor was volunteering remotely with Palmetto Hope, helping women navigate unemployment claims and emergency rental assistance during the pandemic. She was writing regularly, finishing a longer essay about financial recovery after divorce. She was video chatting with her nieces and nephews, taking online yoga classes, reading books she had been meaning to read for years. Her life was small in square footage but vast in richness. One afternoon, while sorting through old photos to create a digital album for Patricia's birthday, Eleanor came across her wedding photos. The formal portraits, the candids from the reception. She looked at her 29-year-old face, so radiant with hope and certainty. She didn't feel anger at that young woman, just compassion. "You did the best you could with what you knew," Eleanor whispered to the photo. "And you survived." She put the photos in a box labeled Archive and stored it on a high closet shelf. Not forgotten, but not defining her anymore. That evening, Eleanor poured herself a glass of wine, a good Cabernet she had splurged on, and sat on her patio watching the sunset. Dogwoods were blooming in the small common area behind the townhouses. The air smelled of wisteria and fresh-cut grass. She thought about the journey from that morning on the porch of the Trad Street house, standing in August humidity with cold coffee and a dead heart. She had been so broken that day, so lost. But broken things can be remade. Lost people can find themselves. Eleanor had spent 32 years begging Richard to love her, to see her, to value her. She had negotiated and compromised and made herself smaller, trying to fit into his narrow vision of who she should be. The day she stopped begging, something in her had died. The accommodating wife, the woman who traded her own needs for the illusion of peace, the person who believed her worthiness was contingent on someone else's validation. That death had been necessary, painful but liberating, and from that ending, someone new had emerged. Not perfect, not unburdened by scars, but free, autonomous, belonging fully to herself. Eleanor raised her wineglass to the sky, to the ending sun, to the woman she had become. "To rising," she said aloud. The birds in the live oak tree called back, a chorus of affirmation. Eleanor smiled. Tomorrow, she would wake up and continue building the life she deserved. Not the life Richard had allowed her. Not the life she had begged for. The life she had claimed for herself. She had stopped begging. Her heart had died. And in that death, a woman had risen who didn't need Richard or anyone else to validate her existence. She was enough. She had always been enough. And that knowledge, hard-won and blood-bought, was the truest freedom she had ever known.